All right, guys, here we go. We are going to be learning how to divide a decimal by a whole number today. So, again, this requires a good bit of thinking, as all math does, but especially this division and multiplying with decimals, multiplying and dividing with decimals, because we've got to figure out what in the world are we actually doing here. It's not as much the process. I mean, it's obviously about the process some, but it's also about how does it work and why does it work. So let's get started. Today we're going to start with the problem 3 60/100 divided by 3. Now, you can think of this as $3.60, which you know I automatically do when I see decimals. My mind automatically goes to money because that's what we use with decimals. So that's kind of what I'm thinking here. So I'm going to go ahead and put this guy in the house. Remember to leave a little space at the top. And so what we're doing here when we're actually thinking about it is we're saying we have $3.60 that we're going to split into 3 different groups. So if I am going to give 3 different people part of $3.60, how much does each person get? So I'm going to draw that over here just to kind of think about it. If I give, I'm going to split $3.60 between 3, pull it over for you, sorry, people. How much does each person get? Now, we're not going to write this down every single time, but I do want you to be thinking about it because that way when we look at our answer, it will make a lot more sense when we're trying to figure out $3.60 split up between 3 different people. All right. Now, let me tell you a little bit about decimals because here is kind of where our standards get a little tricky. Quite honestly, there's a process that's easy to do when you know the standard algorithm. But alas, in 5th grade, we're not teaching the standard algorithm of division, and we're using partial quotient, which I know many of you adore. But here's what we're going to do. If you have a decimal here in your dividend, that's fine. You can have a decimal in your dividend all day long. But here's what I want you to do. Take your red pen. Sorry, Mommy got stuck in the little groove here. Here we go. Take your red pen. You're going to move this decimal up, and you're going to forget about it. Now, if I was here at school, which technically I currently am, but tomorrow, which is going to be Tuesday, I will not be, so I can't show you this picture, but I will when I get back on Wednesday, of this fabulous man who you can imagine eating a big bowl of pasta, and he's an old Italian man, and he says, forget about it, okay? You're going to move that decimal up and do exactly what he says. You're going to forget about it, okay? Just divide as usual. So we've gotten rid of that decimal. We've put it in our quotient, and now we have forgotten about it. So let's divide 3 into 360. Well, I know if I took 100 out, 3 times 100 is 300. I subtract, I get 60. I know that I can do 20. 20 times 3 is 60. When I subtract, hooray, I get 0. So then I finish up my answer here by adding them up. And remember, we have to do our decimals here. And we have 1 and 20 hundredths. Now, let's think about this for a second. If I have 3 of us, me, William is in the room, and Brooks Belsky, okay? If I'm going to give, each of us are going to get a part of $3.60, does it make sense that we would each get $1.20? Of course, yes, that makes perfect sense. Now, here's the key that you have to be super duper careful of. You have got to put your answer in the correct spot, meaning this 0 has to line up correctly with the last digit over here, okay? I can't put 20 over here and put my 2 and my 0, because then all of a sudden everything's not lined up. So your ones place has to go over your last digit there to the right, okay? Otherwise, it will not work. All right, let's do another example. So, second of all, we have 2 and 50 hundredths divided by 5. Now, what's the rule with our decimal? That's right. Move it up and forget about it. So again, I'm going to use my red pen and move him up, and I'm done with him. And in fact, if you want me to spell forget about it, this is how I spell it. Forget about it. Okay? Forget about it. That will certainly not be a spelling word anytime soon, but it is a very fun word to use. So, now that we're done with our decimal, we've moved them up, we're done with them. We're thinking if we're going to split $2.50 into 5 different groups, how much would each person get? So, how many times will 5 go into 25? It'll go into 25 5 times, but I know that I have to add a 0 to make it 50, right? Now, I have to put that 0 over this 0, otherwise it won't be correct. We have to line up our place value, okay? Really here, it's not the ones, but it's the last digit that we have, so we can line it up right there. 50 times 5 is 250. We subtract, we get a 0, and we're done. Boom. Now, what if we have 2 and 58 hundredths divided by 3? I'm going to let you work on it a little bit while I work on it too. Decimal, move them up and forget about it. Then we're thinking, how many times will 3 go into 258? Well, I know 3 times 8 is 24, so I need 3 times 80. And don't let this decimal confuse you. Just work like you would normally. Just pretend like 258 is a whole number, that it's not $2.58 or 2 and 58 hundredths. Pretend like it's 258, just like you would. You would put the 0 over the 8. 80 times 3 is 240. When I subtract, I get 18. Now, I'm not quite done. How many times will 3 go into 18? 6. Again, I'm lining up my 6 over the ones place. Don't get confused by the decimal. Just line it all up over this last digit. 6 times 3 is 18. When I subtract, I get 0. Now I have to add these two together. Remember, keeping up with our place value. And if I'm going to add these up, what really is going on here? That's right. I really have a decimal and a 0. And when I add those up, it's 0.86. That's my final answer for that problem. Okay. Here's another one. 2, let's see, I'm going to put down just a little bit. 2, oh, no, I'm sorry, I just did that one. All right, let's do 8 into 180. Okay, so now this one's a little bit different because, you know, we live in a world where things don't easily divide, or they don't divide evenly. And up until now, we've had remainders, okay? Your whole world in division has been revolving around those extra pieces called remainders. Well, we do a lot of work with decimals in 5th grade, and so I'm going to tell you that the remainder is about to go away. So we have 180 divided by 8. Now, before we even get started, can we please establish or remember, in the number 180, where is the decimal? Don't you dare say there's no decimal in 180. There always is. He's just invisible. It's his superpower in case these ever need him. That's right. It's to the right. And what can you also add to the right of that decimal if you needed it? That's right. You can add a 0. And we're going to come back to that in just a minute. So let's work the problem for a minute. We have 8 into 180. I know that 8 times 2 is 16. 8 times 20 is 160. So remember, again, line up your zeros. Now, how many times will 8 go into 20? 2 times. 2 times 8 is 16. I subtract, I get 4. Now, up until now, our answer would be 22 remainder 4. But this is the cool part about division with decimals. We have a superpower that we can use if we need it. And that is that we can add a 0 to the right of this decimal. So that if we have a 0 there, we can do what with him? That's right. We can pull him down and use him. So now I have 8 into 40, which is what? And remember, it's 5. Remember here, you have to write the answer, part of your quotient, over whatever digit you're dividing. And you're using that 0, that's the far right-hand digit you're using, so it has to go there. Now, we also had this decimal, so let's move him up and let's forget about him, right? If you want to, you're welcome to move him up the entire way so that he makes a nice row. Hold on one second. Hey guys, I'm videoing a lesson, please. You've got to be quiet, okay? So, sorry about that. And so you are welcome to bring the decimal up the whole way so you have a nice little line there. And we said that 5 times 8 is 40. Want to subtract? I get 0, which is fabulous. So now I have to add all these bad boys up. And I get 22 and a half. 22 and 5/10. Let's think about for a second, does this make sense? 180 split into 8 groups. If I'm estimating, I'm thinking 8 goes into 16. I know it goes into 160 20 times. So yeah, 22.5, I can buy that. That makes sense to me, okay? All right, let's do one more. I'm going to move over to the left-hand side now because I've run out of room. All right, let's do 350 divided by 40. Okay, now remember, you've got the superpower if you need them with this decimal and the 0, but you don't have to if you don't, okay? All right, so how many times does 40 go into 350? I'm thinking, remember, when we're dividing, we have to think about these things. I'm thinking 4 times 8 equals 32. 40 times 8 is going to give me 320. And that's exactly what I need. So, well, close to what I need at least. So I'm going to say 8 times. 8 times 40 is 320. When I subtract, I get 30. Now, up until now, we would just have this humongous remainder, and we would just sort of think it's weird, but it's okay, I guess. But now we're dividing with decimals. So what can we do? What superpower can we use? Yeah, put a decimal to the right of the whole number, move him up, and forget about him. Now the decimal doesn't help us here if we don't use his sidekick. And what's his sidekick? That's right, it's a 0. So you bring that guy down, all of a sudden that 30 turns into 300. Does that help? Certainly. Now I'm thinking, how many times does 40 go into 300? Well, I know that 4 times 8 is 32. 4 times 7 is what? That's right, it's 28. So I'm going to do 7 times 40 is going to be 280. I'm going to subtract. Oh, man. I'm close, but not quite. I still have 20 left over. Remember, I don't want a remainder anymore. So what else can I do? We haven't talked about this, but use a little bit of reasoning. What can I do? That's right. I can put another 0. Bring him down, and all of a sudden I have 200. Now, how many times? I'm thinking 4 goes into 20. How many times? 5. 5 times 40 is 200. Ugh, hooray. And I'm done. Now, here's a little piece of trivia. How many zeros could I add over here to the right if I needed to keep going with this problem? How many do you think? Let's talk about when we were talking about place value earlier in the fall, back like in August and September. How many zeros could we put to the right of this decimal? Not even talking about division. Yes, an infinity amount. An infinity amount of zeros, and you can use them as many times as you want to. Now, does that mean you want to bring down that many zeros? No, of course not. But you can if you need them. And so that's pretty cool. So let's think about this problem. Does it make any sense? If I have $350 and I'm trying to split it up into 40 different groups, how much is each group going to get? Okay, well, I know that 40 times 8 would be about 320. So a little more than 8, yeah, that makes sense to me, that would be the answer. All right, that's all I got. Think, think, think. Use what you know, little repeated reasoning, and you're going to do great.